9.4. We are going to get into equation mode. The steps here are pretty straightforward. The one thing we might have to do is a little button press or two to put in here, but we'll see. So, okay. Step 1. Isolate the radical portion. Okay. This is asking, is the square root, is the radical alone? Okay. If it is already, like it is in number 1, we don't have to do step number 1. Okay? But if it's not, which we'll see in steps 2 and 3, then we got to do a step here. But we'll get to that when we get to it. So, for this first one, step 1 is done. Okay, we don't have to do that. Step 2. Okay. Square, take to the second power, both sides of the equation. Okay. It is. That's right. So we're going to make ourselves a little reminder here. X squared and square root cancel each other. So here, the squared and the square root wipe each other out and just leave me with whatever's underneath it. And 5 squared is, oh my gosh, excuse me, is not 5 times 2. I hope not. I hope not. It's 5 to the second power. So you could just do 5 times 5. Or there's this button right, again, kitty corner here, that x squared. It will not put an x, it will just square it. And I can get it that way too. And now it's just a one-step equation and I'm done. Okay. We get x alone, we're done. So the steps are not going to be as long. Not going to need fancy charts. Nothing like that. Just some basic work with opposites. Now, number 2, a little different. I want my radical by itself, but it's not right now. I'm multiplying it by 9. So my opposite, my inverse operation, would be to divide by 9. So that'll just get rid of the 9. Everything else is the same. And 18 divided by 9 is 2. And now we're right back in the same situation we were over here. So we did step 1. We're now going to do, once the radical is alone, we're going to do step 2. Again, if I'm not sure, take your number. There's my squared button. Kitty corner from 7. It's that same as the square root button is when we hit second. And just like that, all the weird stuff is gone. I do my one opposite. And I'm in business. Now, 3 is like the big kahuna. It is the craziest one we're going to see. But if we take our time, it still is not going to be bad. So, what I'll have people ask me on this one is, they'll be like, okay, I know I got to get the 2 out of here. And I know I got to get the plus 4 out of here. Does it matter what order I do them in? Kind of. Okay? Technically, I could do it either way. But what my general rule of thumb is, whatever piece of it is further away from the radical is what you want to do first. What's that mean? Like 2 is directly smashed into it here. The 4, this plus is kind of in the way. It's further separated. So if there's a plus or a minus, we're always going to do those first. Because otherwise, that 2 can get a little complicated. It's going to take us one more step, but it's well worth it. So first step, plus or minus. Ooh. Now we're in a situation similar to we were in number 2. We're multiplying by 2. The opposite is to divide. And after those 2 steps, we have made it. There it is. We have made it to the step. Once that radical is by itself, we square both sides, which again just kind of is the opposite of our radical, so we make it go away. It is the inverse. 5 squared, we did that over here in number 1, so we'll get that in. And we're just slowly taking our time. Thank you. And we get to our answer. That's as crazy as it gets. So basically, again, it's just going to be those 3 steps. Get the radical alone if it's not. Square both sides to get rid of the radical. And then solve what's left. So we will use this in our new packet here. We are going to be on pages 1 and 2 today. And so you look, and the top ones, the ones in level 1, are just like the first example. You get to do the squaring right away. Step 1 is not needed. Radical is isolated. Let's rock and roll. That's it. So on these, your first step will be to square both sides. All 6 of them. No. I said the first part. Now, the second part, we're going to have some different things to do. So this is where I'll kind of give a little bit of guidance here. So these are the ones that my first job, okay, is going to be to work on getting that radical by itself first. So whether that's, I'll get you that first step started on these first couple. You know, I'm adding 3 to this. I do my opposite. And then I'd square both sides, because now my radical's alone just like it was in the problems that we did in the examples. Or I look here and I go, okay, I'm multiplying the radical by 2. Opposite of multiply is to divide. Now this one you may look at and think something weird's going on, or you're like, wait a minute, it can't be that easy because it just isn't. You're like, well, I'll do the squared part because squared and square root cancel, but that just leaves me n. Yeah, there's not always going to be some other step after you do the squaring of both sides. Sometimes just that, you're going to be done. Do that opposite, that through, that's that. Now, I will say this as we get ready to head to the next sheet, because the copy room kind of didn't do them back to back, but this happens sometimes. as you start to do these, if I can get the pages apart here. Oh, oh, Hardy. Ugh. Applications. We didn't do these in the examples. What the heck are you trying to do? Okay, so here's where we're going to jump in. I'm going to help you get set up. These aren't bad to set up either. So, an object is dropped from an unknown height and reaches the ground in 5 seconds. Use the equation t equals the square root of h over 4, hoofed up, where t is the time in seconds and h is the height in feet, to find the height from which the object was dropped. Okay? The only number they give us in the problem is 5 seconds. So I look and I'm like, okay, t is the time in seconds. So what we're going to do is we're going to plug in the 5 for t. We can solve this. So let's think back to what we were doing here. You're like, okay, I got to get this by itself. Fraction over 4 is divide by 4. What's the opposite of dividing by 4? Multiply by 4. And when we multiply by 4, on the right side, it just cancels the fraction. Don't multiply inside the radical. That will not work. What's my last step to get h alone now? That square to get rid of the radical. And again, if I need a little assistance with 20 squared here, I got 20. There is my squared button. And that would be 400. And I can find my height. So it seems like it would be awful and intimidating, and it's not really, because you're just going to have one number that you've got to plug in. So I'll give one hint on 14, but I'm not doing the whole thing. The formula S equals the square root of 21d relates to a stunt car's speed, S in miles per hour at the beginning of a skid to a length d in feet. The stunt driver must skid her car to a stop just in front of a wall. When the driver starts her skid, she's going 64 miles an hour and 200 feet from the wall. When the driver comes to a stop, how many feet will be between her and the car wall? Okay. So here's my formula. Let's find the number. So let's see. She's traveling at 64 miles per hour and is 200 feet from the wall. Okay, so let's see. S is speed in miles per hour. Okay, so 64. You're like, well, then is D 200? D is the length of the skid. This is just saying she's 200 feet from the wall. So no, we're going to leave that as 21D. And what you're going to do is you're going to find out, when you find D, how far she skidded. So what you're going to find out did she stop in time to not hit the wall? Because if we look now, what's my first step going to be here? Do I divide by 21 first? No, because it's underneath the radical. If the radical is the first thing in your way, that is going to be the first thing that we are going to do here. And you're like, ooh, this number could get kind of big. It could. So here, those cancel. So 21D, 64 squared, that's going to be a large number. Duh. But now since we're multiplying by 21, we're going to divide by 21, be hoping for our, whoops, it'd help if I put the right number in. Ooh, that was close. Yeah. So here, since it mentions about rounding to the nearest foot, that's what I'm going to do with this. So since it's a little over 195, we'll round to 195. And the question is, how many feet will be between her car and the wall? 200 feet from the wall. She skidded 195. She was 5 feet from getting really hurt. Luckily, she's a professional, so she figured this out. So that's kind of what we're playing with on these. So give those a shot. There's a couple of review problems at the bottom to try out. See if you get stuck. Let me know. I'm more than happy to jump back in and help out with that.